Hey, welcome to another episode of Footnotes. Today we're talking with Bryan Murdaugh, a co-founder of a company called Fivable here in town. They're a software development shop, but while we don't talk a lot about development, we do talk a lot about finding meaning in work and maybe doing things a different way than your industry would maybe have set as the convention. I think this is a great episode that talks a lot about how a person has just made conscious decisions to maybe go against the grain a little bit in their industry and live to tell about it. All this is next on Footnotes. Well, Bryan, thanks for sitting down with us on Footnotes today. And we got Bryan Murdaugh here, who's co-founder of Fivable, a web development company here in town. Why don't we start out with what's Fivable and what are you doing, and then we'll get into what we really want to talk about.
Right. Well, it's funny because my team will tell you both in sort of a really authentic and a torturous way that I'm a quick start. And so I always want to razor everything down to, well, it's this. We're a development studio. We develop software. Most of it's web-based, business applications. The strange thing is that we aren't really a software company. Mm-hmm. We build software for other people. So that's sort of the key. And there are a bunch of different ways that people look at building custom software businesses. But our focus is, look, you've got a business need, a problem, an idea, a way to innovate. You have this idea around that. Maybe you don't have any sort of like technical or software experience. We can come in and do the rest of that step for you based on your idea. That's kind of the short-ish version.
Yeah, sort of like you're building tools for people.
That's right.
They can sort of imagine what it would be like, but they may not have the technical depth or expertise or want that, and they'll hire for it.
Right.
So if I stitch together a series of conversations that you and I have had over the years, it seems, and this is sort of strange, but it seems that you're a little at odds with your industry.
Yeah.
Why? Or where did that come from?
I think it comes from a few different places. The first bit of it, I think, is around our beginnings. I had worked for a bunch of different startups. I was in ministry for a while. I was doing a lot of different things. And what I realized is that most of the people that I have ever worked for didn't really do a good job of providing meaning in a meaningful place for me to work. And I knew that I had some technical skills in the software arena. And I also saw a need for people to be able to solve problems in a way that they didn't expect. And early on, my business partner, who I've known for 7 years, we met on the first day of third grade. He had no software background at all. He was kind of a media guy, was really good about details and an artist, and he had some really good project management skills. He was actually coming straight out of civil engineering project management career. And about that first year, maybe the second year, I had come up with this completely made up stat that I threw on a piece of paper that I posted up on my wall. And it said 86% of people do things the hard way because they don't know the easy way exists.
Okay.
And there's sort of the maybe typical software guy, IT nerd guy way of looking at that, which is like, well, there's a lot of people who are copying and pasting out of Excel spreadsheets, and they're doing all this stuff that a computer could do, whatever. And that's certainly foundational to this idea of people doing things the hard way. But I think more often it's about looking at a process, a problem, a situation, a way to innovate from a different perspective and saying, have you ever thought about it this way? We happen to be a company that has some skill in software, and that's how we apply. That's the tool that we apply to solve those problems, or create those solutions. But it's way more about the creative process. As I tell clients all the time, well, all I do is draw boxes. But it's that box drawing activity and thinking your way around from a different perspective that I think really helps to differentiate us and the way that we do things. A lot of times that comes in the form of a question that I get all the time. Somebody will say, oh, well, we're looking at hiring a firm like yours to do some work, but can you tell us about the industries that you serve? And that's a really tough question for us, because a lot of times when we enter an industry, we cross it off the list because we're so entrenched in that client's intellectual property and their processes and their trade secrets that it's almost like the ad agency that can't serve Coke and Pepsi. Like there's a conflict of interest to do that.
Sure.
But the industry that we serve, to sound completely cheesy, is really just innovation. What is it that you're doing that requires some other level of, even if it's not just the software, maybe it's not automating something, it's just, I need an easier way to collect this data, or I need an easier way to talk to another person, or I want to get the dumb stuff out of the way. We're really excited about those. I want to get the dumb stuff out of the way so I can spend more time with a human. Meaning that's my client, or whoever it happens to be.
Do you think that's the essence of sort of technology's job?
Yeah. One of the sort of throwaway lines we use a lot is that we want to help people stop computing and start being human. Because we do think that there's a lot of effort spent on things that are kind of silly. Like, I get that. And it's not about automating it for the pure sake of automation. It's about, how do I drive a more personal relationship with my product, with the service that I do.
Why do you think that seems to be such an uphill battle in technology? Because I think, to your point, you have companies that, the product is the company, and it's sort of like everything revolves around the product or the service that they're doing. It's not where, hey, we've developed this so that. It's more, we developed this, use it. I mean,
right.
Why?
Well, back to your original question about being at odds, is I think there's a couple different approaches where a traditional, software development agency, or even, software engineering teams inside of big companies, look at their software as a specification to deliver on. Mm-hmm. So someone says, I need it to do X, Y, and Z. And the engineers come in and they pull their pencils out and they draw, this is how we're going to do X, this is how we're going to do Y, and this is how we're going to do Z. So there is a legacy of that process. Even if you apply new technologies and new methodologies and agile software development and all of the things that sort of are buzzy in the software world, even if you apply those to that same legacy approach of, you asked for this output and you said you could give me this input, there's a black box, I'm going to fill in the gaps, and end of story. To look at things more holistically, to be more outcome-based, not at the digital level, but outcome-based at the organizational level, at the human level, is different. Different sometimes means expensive. It's a little bit more difficult to apply a cookie cutter or even just proven process at every single step of the way, when you might be reinventing your development, delivery, deployment process along the way as you're building, which really is good for a boutique firm, because that means that we're small and we can go, oh, last time we did it this way. This time the customer is different, so we're going to change the way we do it. It can be more expensive to do it that way. That's the thing a lot, though, that we see a lot.
So, I mean, to your point about, you see something that needs to change, you can change it. That's sort of the beauty of a more agile business, if you will. Aren't businesses just supposed to grow and get bigger and do more stuff for more people? I mean, why are you choosing for Fivable to zig when it seems that, the business world, if you will, and that's a broad term, the business world wants you to do the other thing?
Honestly, to me, it just goes back to that original principle thesis of foundation, which is to provide somewhere that's meaningful. And the meaning that I'm looking for, and my business partner feels this way, we talk about it a lot, is to work somewhere where doing the work is frequently enjoyable. There's pains and there's plenty of stuff that's, tough about doing business in general.
Sure.
But when the actual work is something that is enjoyable, and you say, this is going to have a positive effect on the people that are using this system, and our clients are going to be happier because they've gotten something that's not a giant screen full of inputs that's very, engineering, we would say, that there's just a lot more satisfaction in building those systems and being able to say, you know what, next time we'll do another project and it'll be different.
Where does this desire to have meaning in your work come from? A lot of times I feel like there's a lot of companies that or business owners that they want that. They want that maybe deeper level of gratification in their business, but maybe they're not always able to find that. How hard have you and your partner had to fight to maintain that?
So I think the quest for meaning starts by having worked in a large handful of places where either I was a tiny cog that didn't matter, or when I worked on project after project after project that never saw the light of day. And both of those things are really demotivating. To be told, hey, we don't need you here, on one side, like that's not fun. Or, hey, that thing you worked so hard on delivered with really, high excellence. Turns out that's not what we needed at all.
Yeah.
That happens a lot in the software world, in the technology world, period. You have people who, build something, go past prototype, and then fail or then have to pivot, and then so things get just scrapped. And I think most of the people who work on our team find value in the way that we do things that way. It's a lot more motivating to have something meaningful that you say, no, you do matter here. In fact, if you leave, we might be in trouble. And the second part of that is, by the way, that thing you worked on, there's a really, really, really strong possibility that it's going to actually see users, that users are going to say, this is a cool thing that has made my life better. And I think those two reasons alone make it worth it for me to keep driving towards making it new, making it different, making it always be meaning oriented.
So how do you build a team? I mean, you have a business partner, and so you guys are kind of at the ownership and decision-making level, but how do you build a team? Again, if it seems like the industry is sort of going, full bore in a different direction, frankly, than you guys are doing, at least from a ethos standpoint, which is basically everything. I mean, how do you find people that are technically adept? Because it seems like there's a technical aspect. It's either right or it's wrong, and you've got to have a skill set and be able to deploy that. But where does that extra layer of, I guess, motivation, or someone who's looking to find that level of meaning, or is that something that you're finding a lot of people want?
I think people want that meaning. One of the challenges that we see, and that we see some people struggle with, especially in the past, is that working for an agency that is rooted in professional services, rather than, I work for a software company that's just building software and I'm doing that over and over again, is a completely different work style. So, even in a, really truly agile environment for a software company, like name one, like Spotify, I don't know. What you wind up with is, oh yeah, I'm responsible for making sure that the payments work properly at the subscriptions in Spotify, and I'm in that department. Maybe I get moved after a project finishes or something like that, but I walk in that office in the morning and I know that as a software developer, I'm going to work on that product. Mm-hmm. When you show up for work at Fivable as a software developer, you might touch 6 projects in a day. And one of those projects may be one that you didn't write the code for. It might be a project that your owner wrote the code for 9 years ago, and you're having to pick up the pieces of something that doesn't work anymore. Mm-hmm. Being able to switch gears, where we sort of discourage what we would call clutch time internally, of changing gears and the bad things that happen around multitasking. We do need the ability to switch in any given day to be able to work on things that are different. So you have to be in a different headspace. The amount of time you spend on a problem or on a solution or whatever it happens to be that you're writing software against does need to be a lot more calculated. So estimates matter a lot more in our world than they would in, a big major software company. So that is a particular challenge. We have some internal, razors that we use to see the kinds of people that work well. They're usually not around like, what's your background in software? What software companies have you worked for? That's usually not a really good indicator. A lot of times, believe it or not, musical ability is a pretty good indicator.
Why musical ability?
I think there are a lot of internal to the brain management, whatever they are, triggers, techniques that pair well between being able to work in a professional services industry, and especially in a technical one, and being able to manage, listening to the drummer in the band, or being able to play an instrument with both hands and kind of engage all parts of the brain to do things all at a time while you're thinking, while you're solving, while you're real time responding to external, stimuli. I don't know. It happens to be a pretty common thread.
Yeah.
My business partner and I were both music people growing up, and it felt like a good thing to sort of ask people as a personal question in an interview, because it fits our culture well, to be like, oh yeah, music's a big part of what we do here because we like to listen to music. We like to read books. We like to, talk about nerdy movies. And what started to appear is this pattern of the people who we said, oh, it's okay, you don't have to play music to work here, and that we're a little bit less able to jump from one thing to the other like we needed.
Well, and listen to you, I don't want to sort of like blow glitter around the room, but it's almost like, you're, maybe I'm getting this wrong, but I mean, you're hiring, you're like, hey, we want the whole person to work here. We need a skill set. There's some things that we need in terms of some training, because you got to have vocabulary, you got to know, speak our language and those kind of things. But it does sound like, if I take what you're saying with, finding meaning in the work, there's a desire for variety all around that meaning. In other words, we want to do stuff that matters to someone that only we can do it. But it sounds like you're trying to engage the whole person. You're not just engaging their resume. It's like we realize that you're a person and that you are doing this work as well as interacting with the team.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I probably wouldn't have used that phrasing, but it's true. I mean, one of the things that I instantly think of when you say that is, if you don't like what we're doing, like if you don't like switching gears, if you don't like the kinds of projects that we work on, if you don't like starting from scratch every once in a while, if you don't like me or my business partner, it's really gonna be hard to work in our environment. So yeah, the whole person is, and we get into like a lot of that just in the normal course of work. We try to live like in it, which is weird because now that we're 100% remote, 2.5 years ago, all of us were in one building, and now we're in, 4 states, 3 countries. So it's been a challenge to maintain just getting each other.
Sure.
We're still maintaining it, at least at some level, I hope.
Yeah. Well, I guess the proof is in the revenue. I mean, in other words, you're getting hired for work, and you're making a livelihood from it, and the rest of your team is doing that as well. So a lot of the positives of that, and maybe the positives are easy to see. What are, if there are any drawbacks to sort of making an intentional decision to run a firm of that type in that manner? Are there drawbacks?
One of the things, I think it lengthens the sales cycle a lot. So it's almost like it's an acquired taste.
Mm-hmm.
Like once people see it, they say, yeah, this worked because this is a little bit it's a little bit different, your approach. The fact that and I didn't mention this before, but the fact that a lot of our value that we would put on the work we're doing, the software we build, great, the code good, the design great, sure, all of those things. But the reason that they're good is because we put so much value in our discovery process, in asking all the right questions and spending days and weeks and sometimes even months on understanding what we're trying to accomplish before we start trying to accomplish it, is tough for some people to swallow because they think, man, that sounds like a lot of work for me. And we warn people about that it's going to be more work for them up front. And then the other thing is that people think, oh, well, I needed this yesterday. And we're not good at I needed this yesterday. We're pretty quick and we're pretty agile, but the immediate, there's not a lot of instant gratification we can supply because we're going to start from scratch. The other challenge is, back to the team employment sort of vetting process. It's really long too. It takes a long time for us to figure out when it's time for a new team member, right? Because it's a hard decision to make because of what comes next, which is it takes us a very long time of having somebody working on the team to say, yeah, they can do this. They can do the thing this way.
I mean, are people joining a company or are they joining a band?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot like joining a band, probably. And one of the things about that is that we have traditionally and to great success used internships as the way that we figure out our talent pipeline. Again, the pandemic sort of put a kink in that process. We're working to get it back to its former state as closely as we could with doing remote internships and things, but they're harder.
And are these undergraduate interns, or are they just? I mean, does that have anything to do with level of education or where they are in life? Very
little to do with where they are educationally or where they are in their career, other than the later that you are in either of those things, it's a lot harder to sort of shoulder being an intern.
Gotcha. Yeah. From a prestige standpoint, in other words,
Sure. Yeah. Prestige, income, whatever other things you have to do. But we have had interns as young as 17, so in high school still, undergrad through all levels of undergrad, graduate, veteran sort of transition through federal programs and things like that. And generally, we feel like we get the best mutual benefit when they are early undergrad, or that they have opted, like now a lot of people are, that they've spent the last 4 or 5 years coding. They graduated high school and maybe they're going to do something a little bit different than try to do comp sci or computer engineering or math or electrical engineering or something that we would hire into as a degree. And maybe they do like a short certificate program or a code school, or maybe not even. So we're not real snobby about how we intake interns, because it's way more about your ability to think through the kinds of projects and the kinds of problems that we tackle, and the ability to go, oh yeah, this is something that I really enjoy working on.
Okay, so usually interns are ways that you guys are finding talent, and that's interesting that you're saying it's not necessarily as dependent on point in time with education or even sort of skill set. It's more of just someone who wants to throw in and seems to like what you guys are doing and is willing to learn and maybe be humble, not just in their attitude, but just even from maybe an experience standpoint, just being willing to sort of start small. We cover a lot. I mean, it's a very interesting take on an industry that I think from the outside, a lot of people would say, you're builders. You build something that doesn't exist. It's a tool. You plug it in somewhere and then they use it to do whatever they're going to use it for. And it doesn't sound like you're shying away from that. But it's sort of one of those beauties of business ownership where for you and your partner, you want to run a business that does that, but in a different way and maybe with a different mindset. And I mean, maybe they are joining a band.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's interesting is for some reason we use construction analogies a lot. I think probably because it's very tactile and people live in houses, so they kind of understand what it took to go into that.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people in the general population would look at a software development company as being, maybe the framing carpenter in the construction of the house. Like, oh, there's code and that's part of this, and the frame goes up in the house. But the way we approach things is a lot more like we're the architect and we're the bank and we're the carpenters and we're the plumbers and we're the finishing carpenter. Like all of those steps are into one, because when we get the idea of what we're trying to architect, what we're trying to build a solution around, really we're going to get through the entire process and not just deliver some code based on the fact that somebody said the code needs to do this.
Well, it's cool to hear what you guys are doing. But even that you, again, are making these sort of conscious decisions to do it in the way that makes sense to you, and that you and your partner want to be true to yourselves first. You got to kind of, look in the mirror on those things. And the fact that you've been able to build a business around it that not only supports you guys, but helps to support other people. We need that times a zillion, I think, not just around here, but everywhere. And I think also a footnote in there among many is just that meaning does matter in your work. And that work is a place where you can find and create meaning. It's not just sort of a job or a string of tasks, but that has become important to you guys and that you've fought for that. And it's just cool to hear stories like that.
Thank you.
It's easy to talk about, but thank you for being willing to sit down and just to kind of lay it out that way. Yeah. Wish you guys the best.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.